Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're beginning our descent now.
There's a lot of people building flight simulators now, so I thought I'd build me one. I am a private pilot, and I find them pretty useful. Mine's not like a thing of beauty or nothing, but it gets the job done. This laptop up here, I've just got some sectionals pulled up. You can go to like FAA.gov and all of the sectionals, VFR, IFR, en route charts, everything is there for free. You can download it. I do have sectionals, but I don't have one for every state for sure. They cost too much. And this is where I just keep my laptop in the front of this thing. It's kind of a sucky laptop. I'm going to have to get a tower system. Right now this thing is on casters, just so I can kind of roll it around my man cave down here. There's not a whole lot of room left down here. We're like motorcycle freaks and motorcycles everywhere. But anyway, this thing's going to be on a motion base eventually, and I'm going to put a monitor here and one on the other side. So right now I only have the front view. I've just got a couple boat seats in there. They're about as comfortable as an airplane. I made this 42 inches wide, which is the same as a 172, but it has a 40-inch TV in it. I bought the Satec yoke and throttle and radios, the rudder pedals. Everything works in it. It would be nice to have the side views. On the back I put a piece of plexiglass. It's just velcroed up here, and that's just so I can get a little bit of light inside that thing, because that's one thing that's not realistic about this flight simulator anyway. It's dark, and airplanes are not dark. And then sometimes I have to hold the heat in, you know, when it's cold down in the basement. I did put heat in, and then it has, you know, a fan under the instrument panel, and I put another fan up here. They're both 3-speed fans, so they keep it from getting stuffy. I put this hinged door up here on the front, and that's so if I'm doing like a long, boring flight simulator flight, I can watch TV. I do have headphones that are hooked into the sound, and I even carry oxygen that I can hook into an oxygen generator that I just happen to have. I mean, these are only as realistic as you make them. They can be a useful tool if you want to, you know, practice instrument approaches or just VFR flight. There's a couple apps that I use that I just got off of Google Play Store. This one is FS Navigation Map, but it does have the ILS approaches, the airports, NDBs, VORs, fixes, and this one is FS Move Map. Got it at the same place, and it's a moving map as well. The first one I don't think I paid for. I think I did buy this FS Move Map, and it's supposed to have airports on the one that I bought, and I can't get them to populate, and I I sent an email to the guy that wrote the program, and I've yet to hear back from him. This is just a mini keyboard, and it connects, wirelessly. Put a USB key in the USB port, so you don't have to run any wires. And that's so I don't have to keep a big laptop in here. And it doesn't look like any particular airplane, like a 172 but you can only cram so much stuff into an area this small. The radios are like 4 or 5 times what they should be anyway. Alright, I'm just going to do a short flight from New Tazewell, Tennessee, which is 3 Alpha 2, to Knoxville, McGee Tyson, KTYS. And I'm doing this in a mall. I had a friend that had a mall, and his name is Mitch, and he had a really nice one. His looked like this. I mean, almost identical. There was no add-ons or anything that made it look funky or nothing. Alright, I got everything on. A lot of times I'll use the ATC that FSX gives you, but a lot of times I won't. Like I said, it's only as realistic as you make it, and realistically, at this particular airport, there's nobody there to talk to, but you would transmit in the blind anyway. So Tazewell traffic, November 50421 is going to back taxi runway 25. And that's about the extent of the dialogue you would have here. Occasionally somebody might be in the pattern or in the airport. I actually used to manage this airport. I managed it about 3.5 years, and there was some traffic, but for the most part it was pretty boring, being here 8 hours a day doing nothing. They cut the grass, Like I said, I am a pilot. I haven't done any flying lately. My flight test was given to me by Evelyn Bryan Johnson. You can Google her. She had something like more hours than anyone living or dead. It was like 68 or 70,000 hours. And she had issued so many licenses or flight tests that, it was up in the thousands. And she had, I guess, every rating that you could possibly get. When she gave me my flight test back in 1996, I think she was 90 years old. And she lived another 10 or so years. I think she died at 102 years old. And she was the nicest old lady you ever met. She was like 5 feet tall. And this flight simulator does not give you a run-up area big enough to do a run-up, so you have to do your run-ups pretty much on the runway in some of these airports. It wasn't even big enough for me to make the turn, really. So in a mall, I think it's up to about 1,800 RPMs. Left, back, right, back. Exercise the props 3 times. First time looking for a drop in the manifold pressure. Second time looking for a drop in oil pressure, which is right here. Third time you'd exercise it looking for oil on the windscreen. And you know, because I don't have side views yet, I have to do this. One thing I noticed about the maul in the flight simulator is, you know, you do your thumbs up, that means that aileron goes up and then down. When you go to the other view, some of y'all might have already noticed this, I do my thumbs up and the aileron comes down. And, you know, it's backwards. So, I'm sure I'm not the only one that's ever noticed that. Blah, 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 everything's on. Tazewell traffic, remember 50421 ready for immediate departure runway 25. I think this thing has a 236 horsepower motor. It'll really jump off the ground. One thing I do try to do is, if I'm simulating an airplane, if I want to simulate it realistically, if it did not have electric trim on the yoke, then I use the trim wheel. But if that particular airplane has electric trim, of course I'm going to use it. Another thing I'd probably do is I'll use the autopilot when I get up close to the altitude I want to level off at, just to level me off and stable me, because Flight Simulator has a tendency to overcorrect, especially with the SATEC yoke. There is a bungee cord in there that's always pulling it to neutral. And a regular airplane doesn't do that. But if I took that bungee cord out, I'm not sure I could ever trim it out, whether it would ever work right. I don't know. I have to investigate that a little bit. So back to Evelyn Johnson. Gave me my flight test back in 1996. She was about 5 feet tall, if that. She carried a stack of cushions about like this, and she would sit on them in her airplane. And she also gave me my oral exam. And you know, you take 3 tests, or actually 4. You take your medical exam, you take your written exam, the oral, and then the actual flight test. But during the oral exam, they can there's no limit on how many times they can have you come back or for how long. They have to be satisfied that, you know, you can handle the airplane. So they sit there across from me and they fire off these questions, and mine lasted, I think, 2.5 to 3 hours, which maybe wasn't that bad. What she would do with everybody, there were people talked around the airport, the pilots, the student pilots, and they would say, look, this is what Mrs. Johnson's going to do to you. And she's going to tell you to plan out a trip from Morristown, Tennessee, K-M-O-R, to Roanoke, Virginia, which I think is about 150 miles. I don't remember. And when you get to the town of Bulls Gap, she's going to say, looks like there's some bad weather ahead. Take me back to Knoxville, or something similar. And so I was ready for it. I knew, I actually went out a couple days before my test and flew that route, so I would know exactly. I didn't want any mess ups, you know. This antenna, you can barely see it, it's called the Blaine antenna or Blaine Tower. That's usually where you check in if you're going to transition into Class C airspace, Knoxville, or, you know, land there. It's about 20 miles out. I should have throttled back way back there, but I was busy talking. About 24 and 14. Thereabouts. So anyway, we took off, and I was, you know, I was a young guy, and I was a wise guy, and I was ready for Miss Johnson. She wasn't going to get me, you know. I was gonna impress her. And what I had done on my sectionals, Which I know these are in red, and you're not supposed to do them in red because airplane lights are red, and the red line will disappear. Turn a red light on, but I had something. They didn't have GPS back then, really, in airplanes or small airplanes. They had some people had Lorans, which stood for long range navigation, but most people were flying VORs, ADFs, stuff like that, and I was no exception. I'm pretty good with VORs and ADFs. So I had, made my radial lines over top of checkpoints, and I could actually pinpoint a road, just using a VOR. So I had drawn me out a radial over a particular road, and I don't know if she even caught what I was doing, but as we took off, I looked down and I said, "You see that road right there, Miss Johnson?" And she said, "Yeah, what about it?" And I said, "That there is Route 160. And she said, "It is." Well, and so I'm thinking I impressed her, with my navigation skills. We fly about 5 minutes towards Bull's Gap, and she said, "You see that road right there?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she said, "What road is that?" I didn't know what to say. I mean, she had me in checkmate already, just 5 or 10 minutes in the air. And so my best course of action was to ignore her, just act like I didn't hear. And she said, "Well, what road is it?" And I just keep looking straight ahead. That's turbulence, that's not me. I'm a pretty bad pilot, but I know that. Anyway, so my course of action is to stare straight ahead, ignore, act like I didn't hear. And, she's like a broken record. She keeps asking me, "Well, are you going to tell me the name of that road? Hello?" And finally, she just, she was beaming a hole through me. Finally, she just said, and getting close to my VNO. So we get to Bull's Gap, and as we're coming into the town of Bull's Gap, now I've already made this woman mad, and as we're coming into Bull's Gap, I look over and she's sound asleep. Now it's a 90-degree day. This was in August. 90-degree day, and I've got the vents open on this 172, and the air's coming in, and I thought, well, she's 90 years old, let's just put her to sleep. And I don't know how, because it was a real bumpy day. It was tossing us all over the airplane. So I'm thinking, what am I going to do? I'm going to elbow her and say, "Hey, wake up, we're in Bull's Gap." No, I don't think so. So, or I could fly to Roanoke. And when we get there, when she feels us touch down, she'd know. And I thought, no, that's not a good idea. That's going to make her mad too. So I try the coughing, and try that, see if that won't wake her up. But we got headphones on, so she didn't even hear that, I don't think. But as we're leaving Bull's Gap, getting to the outskirts of town, her head pops up, she springs to life. And later on, everybody told me, she does that to everybody. I don't know how she knew where we were, but she did. She knew that because she had her head down, and she couldn't see over that tall 172 dashboard. But anyway, she knew. And so she said, "Well, it's bad ahead. Take me to Tazewell, Tennessee." And I'm thinking, what, Tazewell, Tennessee? That's where I'm from. I could find it, no problem. I know exactly where it is. I can't see it, but I know where it is. I know the heading that I need to take to get there. And so I pointed toward Tazewell, and she said, no. I want you to take your sectional, and I want you to take your plotter, and I want you to plot me a course within 10 degrees. Now, I don't know if she meant 10 to the left and 10 to the right, or 5 to the left and 5 to the right. I never asked her, but she said, hold on. But she said, and then I want an ETA. I want you to calculate the ground speed, and I want you to pop out right over top of the airport, as close as you can get. So, all right, that added to the difficulty level just a little bit. So, being it's August and hot out, and I've got the vents open, I open my sectional up, and that wind catches it and blows that sectional over top of my head. And I can't see a thing now, and I'm wrestling this sectional, kind of like I am now, trying to hold a heading, trying to hold an altitude, hit it within 10 degrees, and then, you know, find the course line. So I finally get control of the map, and now I've got control of the map, but I've dropped my plotter on the floor under Miss Johnson's rudder pedals. And I've got to reach between her legs and get that plotter. So none of this she's too happy about. I mean, she thinks I'm a clown. But we do find a way to Tazewell. And she tells me to, you know, fly inbound on a VOR under the hood to Knoxville. And we do some other, you know, stalls and doodly wops and all that. And as we're leaving around the area of Jefferson City, Tennessee, she reaches over and pulls the carb heat and the power back to idle. And she said, your engine has quit. What are you going to do? So, you know, I check the wind direction by, you know, looking at trees and stuff, and I determine the wind direction, act like I've dialed up 121.5, call Mayday, 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 tell what radio's off of Volunteer and the Snowbird VOR, and I say, okay, Miss Johnson, I'm going to land right there, and I'm downwind now for this field that looks pretty good to me. And she comes up out of the seat, and she said, where are you going to land? She's looking over here. I said, Miss Jones, I'm going to land in that field right there. And I'm set up for best glide, and, you know, we're going low and slow. And she said, right there? And I said, yes, ma'am. And she sat back down and so anyway, I finish my downwind, make my base, turn a final, and as I'm lined up for this field, she said, that's where you're going to land? And I said, yes, ma'am. I'm gonna put her down right there. And she said, I'll tell you something. I'm an old country girl, and I've, you know, gardened and farmed my whole life, and that corn down there, that's a cornfield. That corn is 6 or 8 feet high, and this time of the year, it's going to beat us to death. And I said, and she said, look at there, there's a field right over there, which was about half a mile or 3/4 mile away, and about 45 degrees. And I said, well, I don't know about that, because I would have had to stretch my glide for one thing, and then I had to make 2 low and slow turns, one to the right and one to the left. And I said, I think I'm going to stick with this field right here. And she said, all right. And but it's going to beat us to death. So we got down to maybe 100 feet, and she shoves the throttle back in, and she said, take me back to the airport. So I'm thinking, well, all right, she wasn't happy with that, the cornfield, and she's failed me. I start thinking now, when can I get a day off work where I can retake this test, and maybe I can get a new flight examiner, you know, something like that. So we're coming out of the southeast into Morristown Airport, and I call in. We're in 172 Delta Tango, and I said, Morristown traffic, November 172 Delta Tango, descending on the 45 for a left downwind, runway 23. We didn't have push to talk, we had to use the microphone, and I hang the microphone up, and as soon as I do, like 3 or 4 seconds, she says, well, are you going to call in a position report? And I said, well, Miss Johnson, I just did. Did you not hear me? She said, well, you ain't heard nothing I've said to you all day. So I call in another position report, 172 Delta Tango, turn downwind, runway 23. And when we land, she says, pull this thing over there. And she's all hateful. And so anyway, she said, I don't know. She kind of looked around and said, I guess I can give you a license. And then she just kind of giggled at me. She said, I bet you heard that, didn't you? So, I mean, I didn't fool her one bit the whole time. And I don't have an instrument license. I don't know what it's going to be like. I think it's probably going to be far worse. But if you're going for your privates, I wouldn't expect everything to go like you planned, because nothing I did went like I planned. I did not call in, 20 miles out from Knoxville. They don't know I'm coming. Hopefully Flight Sim won't put an airplane in my path. It has happened before, There's been times on the FSX where I would be cleared to land, and here would come a jet, taking up the runway. That's not a perfect program, but it gets the job done. I was talking about my friend Mitch that had a Maul. He also had a J3 Cub and I think it was an L9 Army looking J3 something or other. And when I was learning to fly, I did a lot of takeoffs and landings. I would, go out there just for that. I'd spend an hour or so every time I went out just doing touch and goes or full stop landings. And Mitch, he would catch me on final, and I would be really trying to focus on the runway, so I didn't wreck. And Mitch would come up next to me in his Maul or Cub or something. I'd look over to the side, and he'd be on final too, like giving me the long finger or something, just messing with me. And it was really unnerving, because when I was trying to learn how to take off and land, I didn't know if I was going to live or die that day.
12 Tango November, traffic Viper November 6876 Hotel is 11 miles east 4,700, inbound to land, runway 5.
Well, like I said, I don't have clearance to land here, but I am going to land here. Going to do my gumps check. Gas, undercarriage, mixture, prop speed. Props up, mixture up. Props are ready for go around. Fuel pump is on. I'm going to put in a notch of flaps. I'm still 4 miles out, something like that. Mitch asked me one time if I want to take a ride with him in his J3. Of course I did. I had never been in a tail dragger. I'm a yoke kind of guy. And, the J3 had a stick. And he said, yeah, you can fly it around if you want. With him right there with me, of course. And he said, you wouldn't believe what this thing will do. He said, this thing will turn around. You can go down the runway and turn in the width of the runway. And he said, let me show you. And he, maybe we were 500 feet off the runway thereabouts. And he whipped it around, and kind of like a chandelle with no altitude gain. And he said, you know what, that wasn't all that tight of a turn. It'll do better than that. That's my outer marker. I know I'm a little high, but Flight Simulator has exaggerated sink rates, I think. I've just got like 10 degrees of flaps, and I'm betting that at this power setting, I'm going to touch down just perfect, which it shouldn't. Anyway, so Mitch says it'll turn tighter than that, so he heads the other direction down the runway, and he kicks it around again with the rudder and a little bit of aileron, and it went into a spin, and we're not any more than 500 feet above the runway, which I've never been in a spin. It wasn't a requirement for the private pilot. So, you know, I could have crapped my pants over that one, but he pulled out of it okay. So I think he's a pretty good pilot. I might have to reduce the power a little bit. Make a lie out of me. Well, I've got this set up for fair weather. If there's any wind at all, it's not going to be much. So I can basically float down to the runway. I don't always do that. A lot of times I'll program in cold fronts. And you're going to get, I think, the most surprises with cold fronts.
One two Tango November, Piper November 6876 Hotel is on downwind, runway 5.
My stall horn's on. Uh-oh, here comes a plane right down the runway at me. Look at that. Went right over top of me. Anyway, my stall horns on any of the flight sim airplanes have never worked. I don't know what the deal is with that.
One two Tango November, traffic Piper November 6876 Hotel is on base, runway 5.
Well, thanks for watching my video. Please click like and subscribe. I could really use the subscribers. See ya.